Hello, Robs. We're back with Black Folktales by Julius Lester, and I wrongly stated that there was only two stories left in the previous post, so I will say there's three left, and they're all in this section, people. So far, I haven't really liked this book. I mean, it's decently written, and some of the stories are amusing, but I think they're also a bit pointless, as I would say most folk tales, fairy tales, that sort of thing have a point to them, but I think a lot of these are just open-ended nonsense, but I mean, maybe that's just me. The writing has been good, though. I'll give them that much credit. The Old Man Who Wouldn't Take Advice. Once there was an old man who owned a big farm in Louisiana. He was fairly rich and didn't have to worry in his old age. His sons took care of the farm and managed all the business. All he had to do was sit on the porch and enjoy his old age. He couldn't totally enjoy himself, though, because his wife had died and he was lonely. And you know, an old man, he don't want nothing he can handle. He got to find the youngest, fastest woman that'll have him, and this old man wasn't too much different. Every Saturday, he'd go into town and sit around the courthouse and just watch the girls go by. And when he saw one that he liked, he was after her. For an old man, he could get around well, too, so it wasn't any problem for him to chase the young girls all over the town. One day, he met a girl he thought was the one. She was young, good-looking, knew how to take care of a house, and after he told her how much money he had, she fell in love with him. Soon they were married. Well, this wasn't one of those old men who just wanted the young girl for show. No, indeed, not this old man. He hoped he'd never get that old. On their wedding night, he went to his young bride in eager anticipation, and he cried when he found out that he'd lost his powers. In all of his years, that had never happened, and he'd never had a reason to think that it would, but it had. And his young wife let him know in no uncertain terms what she was going to do if he didn't do something. The next morning, he went into town to see the doctor. Doctor examined him and found him to be in good shape. Jake, you're an old man with a young man's dreams. That's your problem, and there ain't a thing a doctor can do. Old Jake couldn't accept that, and he went to another doctor who said much the same thing. He spent weeks going to doctors all over the state, and they all told him that medicine wouldn't do him a bit of good. He went to see a root doctor. Now, you know, down there in Louisiana, they got the best root doctors in the country. They got some root doctors know just what remedy will cure everything from ugliness to death. These modern doctors don't know a thing with all their pills. You find you a good root doctor, and you don't have to worry about nothing except taxes, because you'll have death licked. So Jake went to a root doctor, and she fixed him up a concoction and told him not to drink it until the third night of the full moon. Well, that was almost 2 weeks away, and Jake couldn't wait that long. He went home and drank it that night. What'd he do that for? He should have done what the root doctor said and waited. He couldn't wait. He drank that concoction, and the second the last drop slid down his throat, he went stone blind. Jake couldn't have seen the sun if it had been sitting on his nose. Stone blind. Well, Jake was really upset now, and he went back to the root doctor to see if she could give him another concoction to get his eyes back. She told him that if he'd followed her directions, he wouldn't have lost his sight, and she wouldn't have anything more to do with him. Jake wanted to lay down and die. He'd lost his powers, and now he couldn't see. There he was, sitting on the front porch, as blind as white folks to racism. So he just sat and waited for death to come. One morning, he was sitting on the porch when a pigeon flew in his lap. Please, old man, please. Hide me in your coat. A hawk's after me. If you don't hide me, he'll eat me. If you hide me, I'll see that you get your eyesight back. Old Jake shoved the pigeon under his coat just as the hawk landed on the edge of the porch. Please, old man, said the hawk, I'm hungry as I can be, and that pigeon is the first thing I've seen to eat in 2 days. If you let the pigeon go, I'll see to it that you get your eyesight, that you get your powers back. Now you have to understand that this was down in Louisiana, and that's the one state that has more voodoo and conjuring than practically any place in the world. So old Jake wasn't surprised that the birds could talk or they could promise to give him his eyesight and his powers back. He didn't know what to do, though. If he had his eyes, at least he could see his wife and land. But what he could do, if he had his powers back, make up your mind, said the hawk. I'm about to die from starvation. Jake called his wife and explained the situation to her. Well, if you don't know, don't ask me. I guess you want your eyes back. Humph. You better give that pigeon to the hawk, and in a hurry. What I care what I care if you see, and she cussed the old man out again. Well, he was really confused now because he wanted to make her happy, but he missed being able to see everything that went on, so he didn't do anything. After a while, one of his old buddies came by and Jake told him all about it. Now I'll tell you, Jake, I figure it's always better to see. That way you can see if something's creeping up on you, and you can see if that young wife you got is creeping out on you. If you got your powers back, that don't mean she still wouldn't sneak out now and then. At least if you had your eyes back, you could keep an eye on her. Jake didn't know what to do. He weighed both of their arguments, and both made a lot of sense, but he wasn't totally satisfied with either one. And if he didn't do what his wife told him to do, she would leave him. But if he didn't do what his buddy told him to do, he'd lose a lifelong friend. Whichever way he went, he was going to lose, so he just didn't do anything. The hawk was still sitting on the edge of the porch, and the pigeon was quivering underneath his shirt. Jake put his hand on the pigeon to try and calm it when he chuckled to himself. He called one of his grandchildren and whispered in his ear. Then he turned to the hawk. All right, hawk, you win. But you can't have the pigeon now. Come back in an hour. Can't you make it half an hour? Nah, an hour and the pigeon is yours. The hawk flew away, and the minute it was out of sight, Jake said to the pigeon, You promised me my eyes back, didn't you? Yes, but you're going to give me to the hawk. No, I'm not. Not if you keep your promise. If you let me go, you'll get your eyes back. Well, about 45 minutes later, Jake's grandson came on the porch and gave him a covered basket. Jake reached in the basket and pulled out a pigeon. He opened his shirt and the pigeon flew out, and sure enough, Jake's eyes came back in time to see the pigeon flying away. He wanted to stand up and shout, but he didn't have time. The hawk would be coming back at any minute. Sure enough, he had barely put the other pigeon in his shirt when the hawk landed on the edge of the porch. You promised to give me my powers back, he said to the hawk. You got 'em if I get the pigeon. Jake unbuttoned his shirt, and the pigeon flew out, and the hawk pounced on him and took him to the far reaches of the sky, and Jake felt his powers return. Thus Jake got everything he wanted, because he made up his own mind and didn't let his wife or his friend do it for him. And that was probably the most pointless of all the stories, even though it had a moral to it. It was kind of boring. I was kind of hoping it wouldn't have a moral to it. See, I got what I wished for, and I still didn't care. Yeah, I'm giving this book so far about a 2.3. Now I'll give it 2.5 just because the writing's excellent, but the stories to me are just pointless. And the one that was meaningful, I guess there were a few that were semi-meaningful, or I don't know. And that's a perfect time to leave while the train is singing. One more. Maybe a couple more.